We're going to move on in just a few minutes, and we're going to be looking at bridging the African power supply deficit, and particularly looking at integrated resource planning and see how that has advantages, challenges, you know, and how it can impact supply and demand right around the Africa continent. So a lot there. We've got a great lineup of speakers from the Association of Power Utilities of Africa, Federal Ministry of Power Nigeria, the government of Namibia, and the Nigerian member from the World Energy Council is in there. And all of this great panel coming together under the very clear and strategic guidance of the chairman of Strategic Concepts. We're going to welcome in just a few minutes, Sean Cleary is going to join us, and we will begin bridging the African power supply deficit. We'll be right back.
Good afternoon, and welcome to this Africa session in World Energy Week Live. The topic that we're going to address this afternoon is bridging the Africa power supply deficit. And we're going to take it through the lens of integrated resource planning. This is of critical importance in order to balance supply and demand in efficient ways and to reduce cost and avoid disruptions in respect of supply. We have a superb panel with us here this afternoon in order to address these questions. We have Kornelia Shilunga, the Deputy Minister of Mines and Energy from the government of Namibia. It's possible that His Excellency Engineer Saleh Maman, the Federal Minister of Power from Nigeria, may be able to join us. He is in a government meeting at the moment, and as a result, he's being represented by Engineer Faruk, who is the Director of Renewable Energies at the Nigerian Ministry. We have Engineer Abel Didier Tella, the Director General of the Association of Power Utilities of Africa, speaking to us from Côte d'Ivoire. And we have, well known to all of you, Professor Abubakar Sani Sambo, who is the Chairman of the Nigeria National Committee of the World Energy Council, Chairman of the Nigeria Technical Advisory Committee on Policy and Multidimensional Environmental Challenges, and Chairman of the Nigeria Task Force on Power. In order to frame this issue effectively, I'm going to go, if I may, to Professor Abubakar in the first instance, to ask him to lay out for us the perspectives on IRP as an instrument for bridging the power supply deficit and aligning that effectively with demand. Professor Abubakar.
Thank you very much, Sin. I'm very glad to see that the plans we have been talking about for several weeks has finally come to fruition. I also want to say that one of the things that I did when I was the Vice Chair for Africa of the World Energy Council from 2007 to 2013 was that we were very disturbed about the deficit, the lack of electricity in Africa, especially Sub-Saharan African countries. And we realized at that time, especially around 2010, that the whole world, majority of those countries that were making significant gains in electrification were using integrated resource planning. That was the time we started thinking of promoting integrated research planning. And that's why when a few weeks ago, I was asked about the topic, I said, well, we should discuss integrated resource planning for African countries. And I say this because even now, if you check the numbers, you will see that the whole world electrification rate is about 87%. That of Sub-Saharan Africa is just about 43%. And if you remove South Africa, it will go significantly down. from energy consumption per capita electricity-wise, average of the world is about 2,600 kilowatt hour. That of Sub-Saharan Africa is about 500. And if you remove South Africa, it goes down to about 153 only. It's so poor. And I also notice that of the African countries whose electricity supply is very good, we notice that Mauritius with 100% access, Tunisia 100% access, Egypt 99.8%, down to South Africa about 84%. These countries are all using planning tools that look very much like integrated resource planning. And that's why I personally think the only answer, especially bearing in mind the issue of cost and the need for sustainability and the need to reduce wasteful electricity consumption, as well as to align electricity plans with overall national economic development plans, there's nothing better than IRP at the moment. And of course, IRP is not too difficult. The only thing that from our surveys, our studies, like I said, when I was vice chair, is that the core energy planners would have to call the national economic planners, the population planners, the environmentalists, and so on and so forth to make it very integrated and being bottom-up approach, beginning with the issue of estimating the demand and then bringing all these other parameters that I've mentioned. At the end of the day, there has to be an optimization techniques that is iterative, so that at the end of the day, the most cost-effective solutions as far as electricity supply will emanate. And that's the ones that the government should pick and utilize to better the situation. It is very bad, the current situation. When those of us in the cities are enjoying near 24/7 electricity, our cousins in the villages have virtually zero electricity. And that is why they are always urging, they are always trying to come to the cities. And this rural-urban drift is not good for African countries at all. So Shin, I think I'll stop here maybe for the next round, or if you want to ask further questions.
No, I think that's a splendid introduction, Abubakar, and I'm sure that the others will be able to draw on that effectively in respect of their opening remarks. We'll come back to a discussion of the implications of all of that in the second part of the session. Engineer Faruk, Nigeria, by definition, being the largest and fastest growing African country with estimated to be one of the 3 fastest growing populations in the world up to 2100, is facing already significant challenges in this regard, which IRP can help to resolve. And in addition to that, will, of course, as a result of population growth, face even greater challenges going forward. How is Nigeria applying IRP at this point in time, and what are your experiences to date?
Hello, Sean. Thank you very much. I was talking on mute, sorry. May I please start by conveying the apologies of Honorable Salim Mamman, the Honorable Minister of Power, who had wanted to be with us. Unfortunately, at the last minute, he asked me to join the meeting due to the current cabinet meetings having with the Vice President. Now, talking straight to the issue of planning, Nigeria currently has about 13,000 megawatts of installed capacity on grid. Out of this installed capacity, only about 3,000, 4,000 megawatts is actually getting to the customers for issues to do with transmission, distribution, and so on. So these are clearly issues to do with planning. And so integrated resource planning, as we know it, is clearly an effective way to plan. However, the idea of planning in the electricity industry is mostly to balance demand and supply. But here are we in most of our countries with a clear imbalanced demand and supply. So planning to balance it could actually make a little meaning, in the sense that you already have a demand that is up to 30,000 megawatts already, and you're having a supply that is only about 10,000. So the issue is bringing us as a country in Nigeria, for instance, to look further ahead beyond the conventional or traditional resource planning, which mainly deals with the generation aspects, to be able to ensure reliability and cost effectiveness of electricity supply to customers. And with the current challenge, one needs to look beyond the generation aspects, and particularly to go into demand side, as against just traditional supply side management. And what we've seen recently and what we are doing is to leverage on another dimension of least cost electrification option, where currently Nigeria is aggregating or defining all the clusters in the country and trying to map out the entire grid using GIS-based tools. And that will allow us to see which communities are where, and what kind of demand could be aggregated in what kind of location, and as well, what kind of digital tools could be deployed so as to allow for customers to be able to participate in terms of planning from a demand side. So I think for us in Nigeria, whereas the National Rural Electrification Strategy and Implementation Plan, which is called NREP of 2005, clearly demands of the government, of the Ministry of Power, to come up with an integrated resource plan. We have not taken so much commitment in terms of ensuring this is the only tool to be used, but we have also gone beyond knowing that the challenges we have are not actually going to be resolved by the conventional, traditional planning arrangements. So I think I would like to summarize by saying, whereas we strongly recognize the integrated resource plan as a veritable tool, but we really are in a situation where the traditional integrated resource planning alone will not be able to help us manage the situation we're in at this time. I think I'll stop here, Sean. I'll also be willing to talk further.
Super, thanks very much indeed. And I think that point is actually very well made. IRP is not a panacea. It's simply a sophisticated, integrated mechanism for planning. If one's supply falls significantly short of aggregate demand, then IRP is not going to solve the problem as a point of departure. And understanding the nature of the demand and understanding what areas you have shortfalls in, mapping that, as you already indicated, using GIS tools, sounds like an excellent point of departure for all of that. May I come to Deputy Minister Shilunga now? I always, for a whole variety of reasons associated with my own past, remember very clearly that Namibia is the size of France and Germany combined. Sometimes I think people forget. So you have interesting challenges at scale, but fortunately smaller challenges in respect to population size, certainly by comparison to Nigeria. So Minister Shilunga, tell us about your approach to this issue in Namibia, and in particular whether IRP is assisting you, and if so, what use you're making of it.
Thank you very much, Sean, and Honorable Minister and the rest of the colleagues. Good afternoon to everybody. Let me also thank the World Energy Council for organizing this very important discussion, especially during this time when we are faced with this unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic. When it comes to ARP, In Namibia, we believe that the principal goal of IRP, we use it as a planning tool to outline and address the appropriate mix of technologies and electrical energy requirements that are needed to achieve the aspiration of sustainable economic growth. In addition to that, it also describes the role of government, the role of our regulator, the role of utilities and IPPs, and also including other stakeholders in meeting the country's electrical energy needs, while at the same time trying to build a sustainable industry. Of recent, demand in Namibia has taken a very big dip, and we know about that worldwide due to the pandemic. And this naturally calls for a modification of supply options to be able to deal with such changes. When it comes to addressing the issues of cost by IRP, it's quite a difficult task. And because, for example, in Namibia, IRP is grounded on the principle of policy of least cost, whereby we identify the optimal supply mix of resources that are to meet the short and long-term electrical power needs in a sustainable, efficient, safe, and reliable manner. However, to enable flexibility in conditions of uncertainty, such as the economics and also electricity import disruption, sophisticated software have been used to run these sensitivities on the least cost priority with respect to the parameters of the load growth, exchange rates, South African power pool market prices, as well as local supply markets. And that means we need to have a generation plan that balances the requirement to keep end-use tariffs as low as possible, while at the same time trying to balance the need to ensure security of supply, self-reliance, and sustainable electricity. IRP is a very important tool, and we respect it so much in such a way that it is also informing policies and utilities on the best course to take, which in some cases will be to implement demand-side management measures that will reduce electricity wastage. The plan itself does not dwell much into details of such wastage, how it will be reduced, but it can identify interventions that can be employed to reduce electricity waste. In Namibia, access is dealt with more extensively under the Electrification Master Plan, and of recent, it is under the National Electrification Policy and the Electrification Funding Portfolio that is currently under development. Some of the challenges that we meet in electrification of our people is the density of the population and settlement dispersion, as well as the economies of scale. Those are some of the biggest challenges that we are faced with in terms of expansion of networks and innovations. It's very much needed for us to make sure that the services are extended to the areas that are under-serviced. Finally, I would just like to say, Namibia is currently updating the ARP The initial plan was developed to 2013. A review and update was done in 2016 and is now again being reviewed because we want to make sure that we are able to have an accurate assessment and decreasing and increasing supply and demand parameters. Thank you so much.
Thank you indeed. Most kind. Abel, if I may, I'm going to come to you now for a continental perspective, an integrated perspective in a certain sense in respect of this. We've had a clear expression, I think, by Engineer Faruk of the utility and the limits of IRP in Nigeria at this point, given the gap between demand and supply. We've had a sophisticated exposition by Deputy Minister Shilunga of the application of IRP under present circumstances in Namibia, not least in terms of balancing domestic supply with supply out of the Southern African power pool on the basis of lowest cost provision. And I think that's an excellent illustration of the utility of IRP. How widely is IRP being applied by utilities across Sub-Saharan Africa? And what challenges have you experienced from your position as Director General of the Association of Power Utilities in its application on a broader scale? Abel?
Thank you, Sean. Honorable Minister Shilunga, dear Engineer Faruk, representing the Honorable Minister Saleh, dear friend Abubakar, Sambo, and colleague from the WEC. It is my pleasure to be part of this discussion panel, and I would like to congratulate and thank WEC for this panel organization. Briefly, APUA have today 57 active member in 46 countries in Africa, and some 25 affiliate member and associate member in Africa, Europe, America, and Asia. So Africa as a continent have utility at different level of development and utility from different sizes. So as you see the level of development, you can see the level of sophistication of the management tools. So the integrated resource planning is the roadmap that our utility used to plan the investment for 10, 20, sometimes 5 years. It depends on the country. But the IRP examines future resource to put to increase the capacity on the all segments, knowing that generation in most countries are with independent producer. So the IRP take into account the possibility of contracting more power, the possibility of connecting the country, and how the segment of transmission and distribution will be. Of course, our utility consider question as, will the customer base will grow? What is the demand? And how do they have enough generation to face this increase of demand? What will be the case when a main plant will go down? If you don't see this, you don't have the response, so your RP will not work for long. So, in fact, the RP helps to prove the value of the investment. Our utility use the RP to convince the government, public, private partner to invest in the sector, and the consideration of all possibility sources. There, the least cost intervene. So IRP and least cost planning are going together. If they don't go together, so the tool is not valuable. So on the other hand, the IRP provides some transparency to the customer. If the customer knows that the planning takes into account the cost, so the confidence will the utility grow. So the IRP is used to identify the partnership, because today our customers are not only customers, they are part of the business in many countries. So the IRP integrate also those partnerships. So generally, the IRP put confidence on the owners, the decision maker, and the customers. So if this is done, you may find that those countries who have a very good IRP put in place, all the stakeholders are part of the implementation. So, but this is diverse. When some country is just at the level of mastering the IRP, other countries have IRP like, and of course utility, like a tool that they are using for a time. Today, for us, the country global energy planning should go with the IRP and the least cost planning.
Thank you very much, Abel. I think that was an excellent overview of the situation. We're now going to try and tease out some of the implications of the what each of you has said in respect of country experience, and in Abel's case, a continental overview. Professor Abubakar, can I come back to you in the first instance? You've now, having initiated this session, having wished to focus the discussion on IRP itself, you've had the opportunity of hearing the perspectives of the other panelists. First of all, what's your reaction? What conclusions did you reach, having heard Engineer Faruk, Deputy Minister Shilunga, and Engineer Abel speak to these particular questions? What is your conclusion about the maturity of IRP as a means of addressing these issues in Sub-Saharan Africa today?
Thank you very much, Shane. My conclusion, having had of the points from Nigeria, from Namibia, and then from the Association of Power Utilities of Africa, is to say, considering all that has been said, still IRP is the way to go. And I say this because much of the apprehension, or shall I say, even the shortcomings of IRP is because the system has not been used for a long enough time. I believe that once we have mastered it, then the fears will actually not be there. I say this because, number one, if we are a bit apprehensive about the correctness of the estimates or correctness of the supply options, then I will say we need to work harder on actually estimating the demand for electricity correctly. We also need to work harder on bringing the national development aspirations more correctly. And in this regard, we need to consider the economic development plan of the country in question. And the standard criteria or parameter that is being used by all nations is the GDP growth rate. And we need to get the correct population growth rate. And we need to factor in energy efficiency and conservation action plan correctly. If we do this, then IRP will begin to show us that it is a very good tool. Then the second point is the issue of uncertainty and flexibility, because in these current times, with the United Nations strongly pushing for goal number 7 of the SDGs, that is promoting the renewables, which are intermittent in terms of electricity provision. And what I have seen from countries that are moving in the right direction are doing is to make sure there's a greatly expanded energy mix to provide for electricity supply. You have countries that have energy mix that are 8 or 9 different types. And once you factor this, then the fear of uncertainty or risks of having no electricity at the time of need will not be there. And another thing that I found in countries that are succeeding in this direction is that they have very good plans to import or export electricity, as the case may be. And nowadays, there are regional power pools that are up and coming, and there are interconnections. I know from Nigeria, we have connection with Niger, with Cameroon, with Benin Republic, our neighboring countries. And once you factor this import-export thing, then the fear of disruption of electricity supply, that comes naturally sometimes because of breakdown maintenance, but also they do come because of disruptions in supply of fuels and so on and so forth. So if we bring these two things, a large number of options in the supply scheme, and then provision for import and export, I think the fear of disruptions will not be there. Then the other point that I think we need to also mention is the issue of our communities that are unserved. And one thing we did years ago, that's about 10 years ago in Nigeria, was to test this energy efficiency and conservation. And we got the regional body, the Economic Community for West African States, to partner with us at the Energy Commission of Nigeria, along with Cuban government, because Cuba, at the time WEC came to do a conference in Nigeria on energy efficiency and conservation, the Cuban ambassador was there. So shortly after that WEC event, he came to me at the Energy Commission, and we got the ECOWAS to partner, and we discovered in several communities in Nigeria that energy saving, electricity saving, or up to 40% were realizable by using energy efficiency. And this 40% could be taken as virtual generation, could be used to energize unserved communities. So with all these considerations, I still think that IRP is the way to go for sub-Saharan African countries.
Thank you, Professor Abubakar. Engineer Faruk, I'm going to come back to you on this for 2 reasons. One is your prime responsibility within the ministry is obviously renewables and integration of multiple sources of supply, some of which are variable, into an integrated delivery system quite clearly requires more sophisticated and integrated planning in order to be able to operate both efficiently and cost effectively. It's also clear, I think, that we face not only highly significant population increases across the whole of the African continent. We all know what the figures for the period up to 2100 are. Broadly speaking, we're going to, by 2050, have nearly 22% of all of the persons in the world in sub-Saharan Africa. By 2100, we're going to have nearly 35% of all persons in the world in sub-Saharan Africa. So the demand curve is changing dramatically. And secondly, as one started saying, the technology platforms that we will be employing in order to meet that demand are changing radically as a consequence of what's often called the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and in particular, the rise of renewables. So if you project your thoughts 20 years out into the future, how do you see Nigeria meeting those particular challenges? Recognizing everything that you've said about the mismatch between demand and supply at present and the need to better map the grid, how do you envisage it over the next 20 years?
Thank you very much, Sean. Again, the power sector industry globally is actually evolving in a very different way. You've mentioned the entry of renewables, which brings in complications that we before now only see from the demand side. But here you are with intermittent generation coming. As you lost load, you also can lose supply. So it creates a very different scenario than is traditionally seen in the traditional gas and coal-fired plants. So in Nigeria, we've been looking at this very closely, especially as you mentioned in the Department of Renewable Energy in the ministry. And so what we visualize is this situation could better be solved through a concerted effort to digital transformation of the sector. And this should come in alongside decentralization of generations, and of course, indeed, the general decarbonization idea. So we are, for instance, trying to do a few pilots, which we call 247 3D PIDA. 3D stands for decentralization, decarbonization, and digitalization of a particular PIDA. And the whole idea is that we should be in a position to go into least cost options in terms of whether it's grid extension, whether it's mini grid, whether it's solar home system. And addition to that, we also realize there is need to take advantage of the fourth industrial revolution elements like the big data, the IoTs, that could allow for two-way communication where individual communities, even in the villages, are able to buy electricity just like they are buying candles, just like they are buying kerosene. So in a way, you improve energy efficiency. You tend to have these things that are more or less some kind of virtual power plants. When there is high demand, you can easily get some load shifting based on choice of customers. So I think for us in Nigeria, the long-term picture is we should continue to march towards digitalization of the sector. And we should also rely a lot more on decentralized generation against the traditional single system when you create different kind of things. So the idea of integrated resource plan is still sacrosanct, but it should be done in a different way because we are now dealing with different kind of situation than we have in the past. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. Deputy Minister Shilunga, let me come to you in the same vein, because what you were indicating earlier, I thought in your initial presentation, was that you were in fact applying almost all of the elements that we've been discussing in the last 10 minutes or so on some scale within Namibia at the moment. You're operating on a least cost basis. You're balancing load between domestic supply as well as supplies from the power pool, and you are using IRP as a mechanism for planning in that regard. The point that Engineer Faruk has very correctly emphasized in his presentation now, which was effectively the digitization of the planning and monitoring capability across the grid itself. To what extent has that been done in Namibia at the moment, and what are your plans going forward in terms of smartening the grid, if I can put it that way, which I think is a precondition to the effective utilization of IRP in the next few decades?
Thank you very much once again. I would like to join the others in support of the IRP as a very important tool. In Namibia, we believe it is very important in a way that when we are planning for sustainable development, when we are looking at our policies that we are developing locally at home, and when we also look at the interdependency between the policies from home and the policies that we are developing within the bloc as SADC, and the policies that we are developing at the UN, and also when we go up to the AU, we have to balance, and we have to make sure that all the policies that we are developing are talking to each other. In terms of how it is helping us so much, we at the Ministry of Mines and Energy in Namibia, we are the policy makers. And on our side, we have our utilities, and we have what we call distributors, regional distributors, those that are responsible for distributing power to the different regions of Namibia. And on the side, we also have got our electricity control board that regulates the sector. We work together. And what our utility is doing, what our distributors are doing is very well known to us. We give them we develop policies for them as to how to implement whatever we need to implement to make sure that electrification is done in the whole country. Therefore, we are always together. Yeah, we have to make sure that the least cost that I have mentioned before is being done within the ambit of now looking at various parameters. I have also just spoken about the Southern African Power Pool market prices. As you know, our challenge, we do not generate 100% of our energy requirement. We depend on other countries within within SADC and within our pool as an African. When we are looking at our costs, we have to make sure that we are doing it within all those parameters, and also considering the capability or the capacity of the end users, whether they will be able to afford such tariffs or not. The ARP is also very important to us, because when you look at it and when you are using it as a tool in making sure that you do electrification the way it is supposed to be, it is also helping us to identify appropriate substitutions, opportunities that can be offered by other energy sources, for example, oil, gas, solar, biofuels, and the rest. And when you use it, you also look at the appropriate technologies that one needs. And it also helps us with the energy efficiency. I also wanted to mention that within SADC, we also host a center of that we call SACRI, which is a center that is responsible for helping the region in looking at renewable energy and energy efficiencies that will be able to help us out, and also to maximize on the use of renewables. Issues of interconnections for us in the region are very important. Issues of interdependency also have to be catered for when we are developing our IRPs. Regional integration. We don't only develop policies that caters for Namibia, but we also need to develop policies that we know will be able to speak the same language with policies that are being developed in the region and also in the continent and the world at large, for us to be able to survive and to ensure the coexistence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kornelia. Abel, I'm going to come to you again with the same sort of continental perspective. And I'm going to offer you three thoughts that I think have come out of this new round. Clearly, lowest cost efficiency, if you will, is going to be a critical criterion going forward. Digitization as a mechanism of enabling effective integrated resource planning is going to become increasingly essential as we go forward, not least for the reason that you spoke of in the first instance, that is that different countries on the continent are at different levels of development with different sets of requirements. The point that the Deputy Minister has just made about the fact that there is exchange of requirement and exchange of power between countries in the same region. We've already heard that exactly the same thing applies, obviously, in West Africa, as we all know, is another central element. So the question that I'd like to ask you is, do you believe that there is a role for the association, for APUA, in fact, enabling access to standard digital technologies that will accelerate the ability of utilities across the continent to be able to integrate more effectively and apply integrated resource planning more efficiently? Is that something that you think could be taken up from where you are?
Thank you, Sean. We started working very strongly and promotion and development of the digitalization among our members, because Africa entered the fourth industrial revolution more quickly than many other continents, leapfrogging. And this is in the advantage of power utilities. So the integration of renewable, demand side management, and all improving integration that Minister Shilunga talked about, the relationship between power pools are based on the quick development of digitization. So today, smart grid integration is not only limited to prepaid meter. No, it's just a starting point. The power pool working is the development of the local market, and we, APUA, as coordinator of the Forum of Power Pool, is how to integrate Africa. Without smart technology, without digitization, this cannot happen. This cannot happen because with the world of today, electricity is all smart. So demand side management is key for a good IRP. But demand side management without digitization make no sense today. So the dialogue with the customer is very important. So all utility today is in back, but you may find that utility without solving all problem of capacity of transmission network are already in digitization. We have utility today, roughly 80, 70, 60% integration of smart meters. So this one is very key, and it can reduce the need of investment on the system. Currently, we are tasked by the African Union Commission to promote the African single electricity market to back the African trade free zone. So we already started working on this, and this will back all integration in Africa. So the balance between the region will be make it very easy, and all this should be based in good communication tool, in good smart system. It is that digitization. So we strongly believe that is a key point for the progress of the continent.
Well, thank you very much. I think that summarizes that point extremely well. Abubakar, I'm going to come back to you briefly, if I may. If you could keep it to a sort of a crisp 2 minutes, that would be very helpful. Are you feeling more encouraged on the basis of what you've heard, this general recognition that digitization is essential, that smart grids are critical, that the ability to be able to integrate renewables and other intermittent sources into baseload within grid formats requires both a degree of decentralization and a significant degree of digitization, and that all of that comes together within the framework of integrated resource planning? That's the message that I'm taking away from what I've heard from your fellow panelists. What's your view?
Oh, yes, I am also having that view very strongly. And I would very much encourage WEC to compile for us the 10 best electricity strategies in Africa. From what I checked last week, I discovered that quite a number of them are already imbibing this digitization that we've been talking about over the past 1 hour. And the countries that I have found out, I have mentioned some of them earlier: Mauritius, Tunisia, having 100% access, then Egypt 99.8, Algeria 99.1, Morocco 99%, Seychelles 99, Cape Verde 96.1, Gabon 90.7, Ghana 84.3, and South Africa 84.2%. In the case of South Africa, I am also wanting to have a special 1 or 2 or 3 pages about their own renewable energy independent power procurement program, REIP. That will help quite a number of African countries. And if we aggregate all of this, the clear element that is scanned through them is digitization. And this is what I hope WEC will do with the assistance of APUA. APUA is a utility for all Africa. APUA can, of course, ask some of us to give input so that we compile a brief, concise report that will be circulated amongst African countries, and that will help the bridging the gap between electricity demand of supply with IRP standing clear and digitization, one of the major tools.
Super, thank you very much, Professor Abubakar. We're going to now have to bring this session to an end. As you know, it's a 1-hour session. So I'm just going to give each one of you, that is Engineer Faruk, Deputy Minister Shilunga, and Engineer Abel, if you have something that you feel hasn't been said that needs to be said, you've each got 1 minute in order to do it. Engineer Faruk, is there anything that you feel needs to be said?
Thank you, Sean. I think just to say that integrated resource plan remains critical to bridging the Africa's energy supply deficit. However, we need to consider the specificities of each country, and we may need to have a new generation of integrated resource plan, hopefully with the help of WEC, depending on the digital tools and technologies. Thank you.
Super, thank you very much. Deputy Minister Shilunga. Just unmute.
Thank you very much. I did not contribute to the digitalization, maybe my last point will be on that, just to say, we all know that when we digitalize, everything becomes, or the product becomes more accessible and it moves very fast. Therefore, we have to make sure that our infrastructures are taken care of, increasingly integrated, that will result in economic improvements and the betterment of the electricity producers, the end users, the economy, and our environment. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. And Engineer Abel.
Yes, the integrated resource planning is a key tool for management, but the integrated development of energy, mine, transformation industry, and trade is the future for Africa. So we should combine all this to make a new Africa we are expecting to be.
Thank you very much indeed. I think the point you made a little earlier about your role within the framework of the African Comprehensive Free Trade Agreement illustrates that last point extremely well, because energy, by definition, enables economic activity and will continue to do so irrespective of the sources of supply. If we do not have better balance between supply and demand, if we don't have higher efficiencies in respect of supply, if we can't operate at least effective cost across the continent, we will be severely constrained in our ability to be able to develop the Comprehensive Free Trade Agreement in the manner in which is envisaged. I'm going to leave all of you with one challenge as we close out, because I think we've validated the proposition that we need digitized, increasingly sophisticated, increasingly comprehensive, and cross-border integrated resource planning, accompanied by a range of additional tools in order to support the requirements of local specificities. But I think we must also take account of the edge of the revolution that we're now standing on. I don't know how many of you have seen BP's Energy Outlook 2020. If you haven't, I'd suggest Google it and have a look at it. They are setting out 3 scenarios for 2050. Their first scenario has oil declining by 10% in one scenario, business as usual, to a reduction of 78% in net zero. In coal, the decline goes 22% in business as usual to 92% in net zero. Almost all of the slack is taken up by renewables with a small amount of nuclear. So the disruption of the industry at large that one of the oil majors anticipates and has just published on now requires us to become much more sophisticated and much more agile in the way in which we manage the interrelationship between demand and supply in order to ensure adequate supplies of electricity to enable effective economic growth, which, as we all know, is the only way in which our continent, growing demographically at the scale at which it is, and expected to play a much larger role in the global economy, can survive and thrive. So thank you very much to all of the panelists. Thank you, Professor Abubakar, for having encouraged the World Energy Council to address this topic in this way this afternoon. And thank you to the World Energy Council for creating a platform on which knowledgeable players from Nigeria, from Cote d'Ivoire, from Namibia, have been able to exchange thoughts and reach, I thought, a remarkable degree of agreement among themselves. Thank you very much all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And a big thanks to Sean Cleary there, the Chairman of Strategic Concepts. And thank you so much, Sean, for that great discussion there, very dynamic discussion. and very pragmatic about what's going on in Africa. And then the integrated resource planning, I think general agreement there that this needs to be used really as a planning tool to address a mix of technology needed to achieve aspirations to sustainable energy growth. I think everybody really looking at that. And interesting how Sean mentioned there the BP energy report that's looking to the future. And again, looking at that huge disruption in the industry. Today, actually, the OPEC will release its World Oil Outlook report. So keep an eye for that later this evening when this event is finished. It will be releasing that report. And again, looking ahead and looking at several scenarios. So this is something that it's on everybody's mind, the transition of energy, and for Africa, it's so important. And a lot of great comments coming in from all of you there. I mean, and again, one big challenge for Africa to really make sure that they address and hopefully resolve energy poverty. This is a huge challenge. But again, when we look at how they can do it and how they can do it in terms of getting, you know, a smarter grid, a more efficient grid, and actually getting power to people, really enabling flexibility such as electricity, import disruption, sophisticated software. I mean, all of that is beginning to happen in some areas, but again, it's about investment, and it's about policy, and it's about collaboration, and it's about making sure that everybody is on board. Heard there that the challenges in Nigeria will not be solved by traditional planning arrangements. Interesting, you know, and again, it's a case by case, and it's sometimes a city by city, and rural and urban areas change. So I think the discussion that we've just heard, there's so much going on, and it's not a one size fits all. And this is probably going to be one of the very, very tough areas whereby solutions have to be found. They are being found. They work in some areas. It's about, can we move them to some of the other areas? The smart grid, of course, everybody talking that they need to work on this. And, you know, demand side management, very, very important, but it's not making sense now, as we heard there. And again, the utilities, it's something they have to put in place. A lot of development in each local market, and that's what people are more concerned about at the moment. And again, but it's about really bringing a smarter grid, you know, it needs to be there. As they said, the smart grids and the smart meters exist, but again, we need expansion on this. We need progress on it, but it is all taking a while. I liked how there was a suggestion there that WEC and APUA maybe work together, looking at the best 10 electricity strategies, pulling them together, seeing what working in what different countries, and actually seeing how transferable that is. But ultimately, I think we heard indeed an agreement from just about everybody there that digitalization is absolutely essential to make sure that Africa becomes, you know, moves swifter in the energy transition, because it can actually leapfrog a lot, because there are many areas where there's going to be new technology put in place that will power up a continent. But again, a huge continent we have to look at. So always some very engaging and interesting and inspiring dialogue there in some areas, but then we have to look at the huge challenges in other areas. But I think the fact that we have some key people on board, and things are changing, and things will change faster, because Africa cannot be left behind in this energy transition.